Pregnant, hungry, and invisible to the eyes of the city, she only wanted to find food for her children. But an unexpected encounter set off something no one could have predicted. The midday sun beat down on the Manchester asphalt with an intensity that seemed to double the already scorching temperature of that January Thursday. Lucy felt every step as a burn on her bare feet, but she had learned to ignore the pain. Her 7-month belly weighed more than it should, not just because of its size, but because of the fragility of the body supporting it. How long had it been since she had a full meal? 3 days? 4? She couldn't even count properly anymore. What mattered was that Kyle and Olivia were waiting for her in the shack in Willow Creek Estates, and she couldn't come back empty-handed. The street she walked on was wide, tree-lined, with large houses protected by high walls and automatic gates, a world that seemed to exist in another dimension, parallel and inaccessible. Lucy did not look at the facades with envy or resentment. She looked only at the sidewalks, at the trash cans, at the garbage bags left on the corners. There was her source of survival. It wasn't dignified, she knew that, but it was all she had. She stopped in front of a corner bakery where a black plastic bag was torn, spilling crumpled packaging and food scraps. She bent down with difficulty, supporting one hand on her knee and the other on the wall. Her breathing became heavy. The baby moved inside her belly as if protesting the effort. Lucy ignored it and began to rummage. She found a styrofoam lunchbox still closed. Her heart quickened. She opened it carefully. Rice, beans, and a piece of meat. It was cold, but it seemed intact. An enormous relief took over her chest. That would be enough for the 2 little ones to eat today. It was then that she heard the sound of an engine slowing down beside her. She quickly looked up, ready to run if necessary. She had been through embarrassing situations before. Men who stopped their cars with ignoble intentions, taking advantage of the visible fragility of a pregnant and clearly vulnerable woman. But what she saw was different. A black, expensive car with tinted windows. Inside, a man in a suit and a boy in the back seat. Edward Hamilton did not plan to stop. He was returning from a bank meeting with Peter, his 8-year-old son, and the intention was to go straight home. But the boy's voice interrupted him in the middle of a thought about the construction company's next project. "Dad, why is that lady rummaging in the trash?" The question came loaded with genuine innocence, without judgment, just the pure curiosity of a child who had never seen someone in a street situation so closely. Edward looked where Peter was pointing and saw the pregnant woman bent over the garbage bag, her dirty dress clinging to her sweaty body. Something inside him clicked. It wasn't pity, it was something deeper, an unease that rose from his stomach and tightened his chest. "She must be hungry, Peter." "But why, Dad? Doesn't she have food at home?" Edward didn't know what to answer. He slowed down even more and, against all logic, parked the car a few meters ahead. Peter remained silent, watching. The businessman got out of the car and walked towards the woman, who had already noticed his presence and was trying to compose herself, running her hands over her dress as if she could erase the dirt and the shame. "Good afternoon. Are you all right?" Lucy looked up. Her eyes were deep, tired, but still carried a spark of resistance that Edward did not expect to find. She wasn't old, he realized. She must have been in her early 20s, maybe 30 at most. Her face was thin, her disheveled hair matted with sweat, her enormous belly contrasting with the thinness of the rest of her body. "Yes, I am. Just looking for some things here." Her voice was hoarse, choked. Edward noticed that she was clutching the lunchbox tightly, as if she feared he would take it from her. "You're pregnant. You shouldn't be making this effort. Do you need help?" Lucy took a step back, suspicious. She knew that kind of approach well. Men in cars offering help, wanting something in return. It wasn't the first time. And she was too tired to fall into traps. "No, I don't need anything. I'm fine." Edward noticed the suspicion and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Shame, guilt? He wasn't sure. He looked back at the car where Peter was watching everything attentively and then returned his eyes to Lucy. "When was the last time you ate?" The question caught Lucy by surprise. She blinked, confused, and then looked away. "It doesn't matter. I'm fine. Please let me help. There's a diner on the corner. I can buy you something." "I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's one human being helping another." "That's all." Lucy hesitated. Hunger was a constant pain that echoed in every part of her body. But pride, even wounded and worn, still resisted. She looked at Edward, trying to decipher his intentions. The man seemed genuine, but she had been wrong before. At the same time, Kyle and Olivia were waiting. If she could get more food now, they would have something for dinner too. My children are at home. They need it more than I do. Edward felt his chest tighten even more. Children, of course. That woman wasn't there just for herself. She was there for others who depended on her. How many children do you have? 2. Kyle is 4. Olivia is 2. And this one, she pointed to her belly, keeping them company too. She pointed to her belly with a sad half-smile, laden with irony. Edward swallowed hard. 3 children, a woman alone, rummaging through trash. Come with me. I'll buy food for you and your children, and I won't ask for anything in return. You can trust me. Lucy stared at him for long seconds. There was something in his voice, in his posture, that didn't seem false. Besides, the boy in the car was watching everything, and she knew that men with children rarely had bad intentions. It was a calculated risk. She nodded slowly. All right. They walked together to the corner diner. Edward ordered sandwiches, juice, fruit, all packed to go. Lucy stood beside him, still suspicious, but beginning to feel a dangerous relief, as if a wall she had kept erected for years was starting to crack. When Edward returned with 2 full bags, she accepted without saying anything. She just murmured a faint, almost inaudible thank you. Where do you live? In Willow Creek Estates, near the bus terminal. Edward knew the name. He had driven past the area before but had never entered. He knew it was an area of informal settlement, without proper infrastructure, where poverty accumulated in shacks of wood and canvas. It wasn't far from there, maybe about 3 kilometers. Can I take you there? Lucy looked at the car, then at him, still suspicious. No need. I can walk, and it's not safe. You're pregnant and carrying weight, please. This time she didn't resist. She got into the back seat of the car beside Peter, who looked at her with innocent curiosity, without malice. Lucy clutched the bags to her body and avoided looking at the luxury around her, the leather seats, the cold air conditioning. It seemed like a dream or a nightmare, depending on the angle. During the drive, Edward asked questions. Lucy answered curtly, but enough for him to understand the situation. The children's father had disappeared upon learning of the 3rd pregnancy. There was no family nearby. She tried to do odd jobs, but pregnant and with 2 small children, no one would hire her. All that was left was to rummage through trash and hope to find something usable. When they arrived at Willow Creek Estates, Edward stopped the car at the entrance. Lucy quickly got out, thanked him again, and began to walk into the labyrinth of narrow alleys and wooden houses. Edward stayed there, still watching until she disappeared. Peter broke the silence. Dad, will she be okay? Edward didn't answer immediately. He just looked at his son, saw the genuine concern in his eyes, and felt something change inside himself. I hope so, son. I hope so. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like it. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. Edward couldn't get that image out of his head. During dinner that night, as he cut the steak with mushroom sauce that the cook had prepared, all he saw was Lucy bent over the garbage bag, with her enormous belly and bare feet burning on the asphalt. Peter was also different, quieter than usual, poking his food on the plate without his usual enthusiasm. Dad, where is that lady going to have her baby? The question came out of nowhere, but Edward had expected something of the sort. Peter had too sensitive a heart to simply forget what he had seen. I don't know, son. Probably in a public hospital. And who will take care of her other 2 children while she's in the hospital? Edward put down his cutlery. He had no answers to those questions, and it deeply bothered him. He spent the entire night awake, tossing in the king-size bed of the air-conditioned room, thinking of Lucy sleeping in a shack without proper infrastructure, with 2 small children and another on the way. He thought of the absurd contradiction of being there, in that enormous house with more rooms than occupants, while a pregnant woman rummaged through trash a few kilometers away. The next morning he made a decision. He called Martha, his secretary, and asked her to cancel the 10 o'clock meeting. He needed to resolve something personal. He got in his car and drove straight to Willow Creek Estates. The entrance to the community was marked by a dirt road, lined with plywood shacks, some with blue tarps covering the roofs. Children played barefoot in the dirt. Skinny dogs roamed in search of food, and the smell of open sewer permeated the air. Edward stopped the car and got out, immediately drawing the attention of the residents. A man in a suit driving an imported car was not exactly a common sight there. He asked for Lucy, and an elderly woman pointed to a narrow alley at the back of the community. He walked carefully, avoiding the puddles of dirty water and the debris scattered along the way. He found her shack at the end of the alley. It was a tiny two-room structure, with old wooden walls and a broken tile roof. The door was ajar. Edward knocked gently, announcing his presence. Lucy appeared seconds later, surprised and visibly embarrassed. "Sir, what are you doing here? I needed to speak with you. May I come in?" Lucy hesitated, looking inside the shack as if measuring the extent of the shame it would be to expose that space to a stranger. But she ended up letting him in. Edward entered and felt his chest tighten again. The room was tiny, with an old mattress on the floor where Kyle and Olivia were sitting, quiet and scared by the presence of a strange man. There was an old refrigerator leaning against the wall, but Edward noticed that it wasn't plugged in. It served only as a cupboard. The second room could barely be called a kitchen, a cracked sink, a single burner stove, and no furniture beyond a cardboard box serving as a table. There was no bathroom. Lucy explained, without him asking, that they used the communal bathroom at the end of the alley, shared by more than 20 families. Edward couldn't hide his shock. He knew poverty existed, but he had never truly entered it. There in that claustrophobic space without minimal dignity lived 3 people, soon to be 4. Kyle was 4 years old and seemed scared, but Olivia, just 2, began to cry upon seeing the stranger. Lucy picked the girl up, trying to calm her. "I came here because I have a proposal for you." Lucy stared at him, suspicious again. Edward noticed and hastened to explain. "I have a farm in Cheshire Downs. It's a large place with a main house and some smaller houses for staff. One of them is empty, the caretaker's house. It has 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, a full kitchen. I need someone to take care of the main residence's maintenance, cleaning, organizing the house. I thought of you. Fixed salary, housing, guaranteed food, health plan for you and the children, and a spot in the town school for the little ones." Lucy remained silent, processing what she had just heard. It seemed too good to be true. And when something was too good to be true, it usually wasn't true. "Why are you doing this?" Edward took a deep breath. He didn't quite know how to explain without sounding condescending or false. "Because I have the means to help, and because I can no longer close my eyes after what I saw yesterday." "You don't deserve to live like this. Your children don't deserve to live like this. And what do you want in return?" The question came loaded with suspicion and accumulated hurt. Edward understood the subtext. Lucy had been approached before by men who offered help in exchange for favors she was not willing to give. "Nothing but the work, Mrs. Lucy. Nothing more than that. I have an 8-year-old son, and he taught me yesterday that I can't just move on and pretend I didn't see what I saw. I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm just offering an opportunity." Lucy looked at Kyle and Olivia, then at her belly. Her pregnancy was advanced, and she knew that time was running out. Soon she would no longer be able to walk the streets looking for food. Soon she would have a newborn to care for, and then the situation would become unsustainable. Edward's offer was a door that could change everything. But it could also be a trap. "I need to think." Edward nodded, understanding. He left a card with his phone number on the cardboard box that served as a table and said goodbye. Before leaving, he turned once more. "You have until tomorrow to decide. If you accept, I'll pick you up Saturday morning. But don't take too long for your sake and the children's." When he left, Lucy stood in the middle of the shack, holding the card as if it were a bomb about to explode. Kyle approached, pulling her dress. "Mom, who is that man?" Lucy bent down with difficulty and hugged her son. "I don't know yet, my love, but maybe it's someone who will help us." That night, Lucy didn't sleep. She lay on the thin mattress, looking at the hole-ridden ceiling through which she could see the starry sky, pondering every detail of Edward's proposal. She knew stories of women who accepted similar offers and ended up exploited, abused, discarded. But she also knew stories of women who lost the chance to change their lives due to fear and distrust. She thought of Kyle, who already knew to wait in silence when hunger struck. She thought of Olivia, who cried less and less as if she had given up on expecting comfort. She thought of the baby on the way, who would be born in a place without minimal hygiene and safety conditions. She thought of herself exhausted, hungry, without the strength to continue that way. The next morning, she asked a neighbor to watch the children for a few hours and went to a public phone booth on the main avenue. She put in the coins she had saved for emergencies and dialed the number on the card. Edward answered on the second ring. "I accept. But I have one condition." "Go ahead. If you try anything beyond what we agreed, I'll leave immediately. No matter where, I'll leave." Edward felt the pain in those words. The pain of someone who had been hurt before, who had trusted and been disappointed. "You have my word. Nothing beyond what we agreed will happen. I'll pick you up Saturday at 8 in the morning. You can prepare your things." Lucy hung up the phone and stood there holding the receiver as if she could still go back. But it was too late. The decision was made. For better or worse, she had staked her fortune and that of her children on the hands of a stranger, who stopped his car beside a woman rummaging through trash. Saturday dawned with a clear sky and a sun that promised another scorching day. Lucy woke early, even before dawn, and began to pack the few things she owned. It wasn't much. Some old and mended clothes, a pair of ill-fitting flip-flops, the improvised toys she had made for Kyle and Olivia with cardboard boxes and bottle caps. Everything fit in 2 torn plastic bags that she tied carefully so as not to lose anything along the way. Kyle woke up and watched his mother in silence, not fully understanding what was happening, but perceiving that something important was about to change. Olivia was still sleeping, wrapped in a cloth that served as a blanket. Lucy looked at the shack for the last time, trying to imprint every detail of that place which, however bad, had been the only home she had known in recent years. She felt a tightness in her chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was fear of the unknown. At 8 sharp, Edward arrived. He wasn't alone. Peter came with him, excited about the idea of having other children on the farm. The boy got out of the car and immediately approached Kyle, who hid behind his mother, intimidated. Edward helped Lucy put the bags in the trunk and held Olivia in his lap while she settled Kyle in the back seat. During the drive to Cheshire Downs, Lucy remained silent, looking out the window, watching the landscape change as they moved away from Manchester. The asphalt gave way to country roads. The crowded houses made space for plantations and pastures. It was a different England, which she knew only from television. Peter tried to talk to Kyle, offering a toy car, but the boy remained silent, clinging to his mother's arm. After almost an hour of travel, they arrived at the farm. Lucy felt her heart quicken as the car passed through the large iron gate, drove up a dirt road lined with leafy trees, and finally stopped in front of a huge, colonial house painted white and yellow, with wide verandas and well-kept gardens. It looked like a movie set. It couldn't be real. Edward got out and gestured for her to accompany him. They went around the main house and followed a trail until they reached a smaller house, simple but solid, with masonry walls, a tiled roof, and a small front porch. He opened the door and motioned for Lucy to enter. The interior was modest, but it had everything she had never had. A small living room with a sofa and an old television, a kitchen with a refrigerator, a 4-burner stove, a sink with running water, wooden cupboards, a hallway that led to 3 bedrooms, a full bathroom with a shower, toilet, and sink. Lucy stood at the entrance, unable to process. Olivia began to cry in Edward's arms, and that brought her back to reality. She picked up her daughter and entered slowly, as if she were afraid that everything would disappear if she made a false move. Kyle ran inside, fascinated by the space, and Peter followed him, showing the rooms. Edward stayed in the living room, waiting for Lucy's reaction. "The house is yours while you work here. You can use everything, organize it however you want. Tomorrow I'll show you the main residence and explain the tasks. But today, rest. There's food in the fridge, bedding in the cupboards, and everything you need. If anything is missing, just let me know." Lucy couldn't speak. Her throat was closed. Her eyes burned with tears she fought to hold back. She just nodded. Edward understood and left, leaving them alone to adapt to the new space. When the door closed, Lucy finally broke down. She sat on the sofa and cried as she hadn't cried in years. Kyle came running and hugged his mother, scared, and Olivia began to cry too, caught by the emotion she didn't understand. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of fear, and hope mixed in a confusion of feelings that she couldn't name. The first days were for adaptation. Lucy woke up before dawn, still with the habit of going out early to look for food, and it took her a few seconds to remember where she was. The bed was soft, the shower had hot water, the refrigerator was full. It seemed like a dream she was afraid of waking from. Edward was patient. He showed her the main residence, explained the tasks calmly, and never treated her with condescension. The work was simple by her standards, but it required attention and dedication. Cleaning the large house, taking care of the clothes, organizing the kitchen, ensuring everything was in order. She did everything with a zeal that surprised even herself. It wasn't just a job. It was a way to repay the trust they had given her. Peter and Kyle became inseparable. The older boy taught Kyle to ride a bicycle, to play ball, to climb trees. Kyle, who had always been a quiet and sad child, began to smile. Olivia also loosened up, running on the lawn, picking flowers, laughing loudly. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from them, but not everything was rosy. One afternoon, while Lucy was cleaning the main residence's living room, she heard voices coming from the veranda. She recognized Edward's voice, but there was another, feminine, that she didn't know. She approached discreetly and heard part of the conversation. "Edward, have you lost your mind? You brought a former trash picker to live here? What if she steals something? What if she's dangerous?" The voice was Renee's, Edward's sister, who had arrived by surprise for a visit. Lucy felt her chest tighten. She knew she would face judgment, but hearing that hurt more than she imagined. "Renee, she's not dangerous. She's a woman trying to survive. And now she has a chance to start over. I won't change my decision." "You're being naive. You don't know her story. You don't know what she's capable of. You're putting Peter at risk." Lucy felt tears well up again, but this time from anger. She didn't want to hear more. She returned to the kitchen and continued her work, trying to ignore the words that echoed in her head. That night, when she returned home, she hugged Kyle and Olivia more tightly than usual and promised herself that she would prove to everyone that she deserved that chance. In the following weeks, she worked even harder. She woke up before sunrise, cleaned every corner of the house perfectly, organized everything with obsessive care. Edward noticed the change and realized that she had heard the conversation with Renee. He tried to talk, but Lucy avoided the subject. She just said she was fine, that she was happy with the work. It was on an April morning, almost 2 months after the move, that everything changed again. Lucy woke up feeling contractions. They weren't like the Braxton Hicks ones that came and went. They were strong, rhythmic, and getting closer and closer. The baby was coming. She tried to stay calm, but when her water broke, panic set in. She ran to the main residence, where Edward was having coffee with Peter. "Mr. Edward, the baby. It's coming." Edward wasted no time. He grabbed the car keys, asked the cook to stay with Kyle and Olivia, and rushed Lucy to the nearest hospital in Cheshire Downs. Peter went along, holding the hand of the surrogate mother he had found without seeking. During the drive, Lucy breathed deeply, trying to control the pain. Edward drove fast but carefully and spoke words of encouragement that she could barely hear. They arrived at the hospital, and Lucy was taken straight to the delivery room. The contractions were getting stronger and stronger, and the doctors warned that the labor would be quick. Edward stayed in the waiting room with Peter, pacing back and forth, more nervous than he imagined he would be. She was just an employee, he repeated to himself, but she wasn't. She was someone who had entered his and Peter's lives in a way he hadn't expected. After 3 hours that seemed like an eternity, a nurse came out of the room with a smile on her face. "It's a girl. Healthy and beautiful. The mother is doing well too." Edward felt an enormous relief. Peter jumped for joy and wanted to go in to see the baby. The doctors allowed a quick visit. When they entered the room, they saw Lucy lying on the bed, exhausted, but with a faint smile on her face. In her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was the newborn, small and perfect. "What will you name her?" Lucy looked at Edward and Peter and then at her daughter, Claire, because she arrived bringing light. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like it. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The months that followed Claire's birth were a period of profound transformation. Lucy adapted to the routine with 3 children, but now with resources she never had before. Claire was a calm baby, who nursed well and slept through the night. Kyle and Olivia attended the Cheshire Downs Municipal School and came back every day full of stories to tell. Kyle learned to read and wrote his own name with pride. Olivia drew butterflies and flowers, filling the refrigerator with colorful drawings. Lucy had a health plan for the first time in her life. She had postpartum checkups, took the children to the pediatrician regularly, and discovered that Kyle needed glasses. When the boy put on his glasses for the first time and said he could see the leaves on the trees from afar, Lucy cried with emotion. How many things had her children missed due to a lack of basic resources? Edward observed everything from afar, satisfied with the decision he had made. Peter was happier than ever, had constant company to play with, and learned lessons about empathy and solidarity that no private school could teach. But not everything was harmony. Lucy's presence on the farm began to generate comments. First came the older staff, Mrs. Teresa. The cook who had worked on the farm for more than 20 years made veiled comments about how things were changing, how the boss was giving too many perks to the new employee. Mr. Joaquin, the caretaker who looked after the crops, grumbled about how Lucy had gotten the best house on the property without deserving it. Lucy noticed the glances, heard the whispers that ceased when she approached. She tried to ignore it, to focus on her work. But the feeling of not belonging to that place haunted her. She was afraid that Edward would tire, that he would realize he had made a mistake, that he would send her and her children back to the misery from which they came. One afternoon, while Lucy was cleaning the main residence's library, she found a letter on Edward's desk. It wasn't addressed to him, but it was open. Curiosity won, and she read it. It was an anonymous typed letter, accusing Lucy of being an opportunist who had gotten pregnant on purpose to get help, who was manipulating Edward and Peter, and who would soon ask for money or steal valuables from the house. Lucy felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The accusations were cruel and unfounded, but the fact that someone had gone to the trouble of writing, that meant that there were people watching, judging, waiting for her to make a mistake. She put the letter back in its place and left the library with trembling legs. That day she couldn't work properly. She went home early and sat on the sofa, holding Claire in her lap, while Kyle and Olivia played in the yard. Edward arrived at her house that night, something he rarely did. He knocked on the door and entered when she opened it, immediately noticing that something was wrong. Lucy's eyes were red. Claire was sleeping in the makeshift crib she had made from a lined drawer. What happened? Nothing. Just a difficult day. Edward didn't believe her. He knew Lucy well enough to know when she was lying. You saw the letter. It wasn't a question. It was an affirmation. Lucy looked up, surprised that he knew. I saw it accidentally. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. I saw it too. And I was furious. Edward sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. That letter was sent by someone who doesn't know me and doesn't know you. Someone petty, who can't stand to see another person get a chance to start over. I already know who it was. A former employee I fired for bullying other workers. He's trying to get to me through you. But what if he's right? What if I really am an opportunist? Edward turned to face her. Do you really think that? Do you think an opportunist would wake up at 5 in the morning every day to work? Do you think an opportunist would care for my house with more diligence than I do myself? Do you think an opportunist would raise her children with so much love and dedication? Lucy looked away, feeling tears return. I just don't want people to think badly of you for helping me. Let people think what they want. I know what I did and why I did it, and I don't regret it. There was a long silence. Lucy wiped her tears with the back of her hand and took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Edward stood up, ready to leave, but before going, he said one more thing. You transformed this farm, Lucy. You transformed Peter's life, and you transformed mine too. Don't let anonymous letters make you doubt your worth. After he left, Lucy thought about those words. Had she really transformed something? Or was she just a desperate person who was lucky to cross paths with someone generous? She didn't know the answer, but she felt she needed to do more. She needed to prove, especially to herself, that she deserved to be there. In the following weeks, Lucy began to observe more, to pay attention to details. She noticed that Mrs. Teresa had difficulty carrying heavy groceries from the market to the kitchen. She started helping her, even if it wasn't her job. She noticed that Mr. Joaquin complained of back pain after a full day working in the fields. She made herbal compresses that she had learned to make from her grandmother. when she was a child and offered them to him. Little by little, the hostility decreased. Mrs. Teresa began to talk more, to tell stories of the old days on the farm. Mr. Joaquin accepted the compresses and admitted they were helping. The other staff also got used to her presence, and some even started greeting her warmly. But the real test came one August afternoon when Peter arrived from school crying. Lucy was hanging clothes on the line when she heard the crying. She dropped everything and ran to him. The boy's uniform was torn, his knee scraped, and his eyes red from crying so much. "What happened, my angel?" Peter threw himself into her arms, sobbing. Between sobs, he told her that some schoolmates had mocked him, saying that his father had fallen in love with a beggar, that he would soon have poor siblings, that his family was turning into a charity house. Lucy felt a surge of anger in her chest, but she took a deep breath and held Peter gently. "Listen here, Peter. People who say such things are unhappy people who don't understand the value of helping others. Your father is a good man and you are a good boy. What others say doesn't matter. What matters is what's in here." She pointed to the boy's chest. "And inside here you know you're doing the right thing. You know that Kyle, Olivia and Claire are your true friends, and that's worth more than any silly opinion." Peter gradually stopped crying, wiped his face and looked at Lucy with admiration. "Aunt Lucy, you're like a second mother to me." Lucy felt her heart tighten. Peter had lost his mother at 3 in a car accident. Edward rarely spoke about it, but she knew that the absence of his wife was a wound that still hurt. And there was the boy, lacking maternal affection, finding the tenderness he so desperately needed in a former trash picker. When Edward arrived that night and learned what had happened at school, he was furious. He wanted to go to the institution, complain to the principal, punish the boys who had mocked his son. But Lucy calmed him. "Leave it to me. Tomorrow I'll talk to those boys' mothers at school dismissal. Woman to woman, no drama." And that's exactly what she did. The next day she wore her best outfit, carefully combed her hair and went to school at dismissal time. She identified the mothers of the boys who had mocked Peter and introduced herself politely. She explained the situation, spoke about empathy, about respect, about how children learn from the example of their parents. She was not aggressive, but she was firm. The mothers were embarrassed. Some apologized, others looked away. But Lucy got what she wanted. In the following days, Peter smiled again, the comments ceased, and he even made new friends. Edward watched everything from afar and realized something he hadn't noticed before. Lucy was not just a woman he had rescued from misery. She was a strong, intelligent woman, capable of solving problems and facing adversity with dignity, and this made him reflect on many things. On what truly mattered in life, on the privilege he had always had, on how a person's worth is not measured by their bank account. One night, while they were having dinner together, Peter, Lucy, the children, Edward, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of family, of completeness, of belonging, and it was at that moment that he realized that all of this had ceased to be just a good deed. It had become something much deeper and more significant. Autumn arrived, bringing colder mornings and golden afternoons. Lucy completed a year living on the farm, and the transformation was visible not only in her but in all the children. Kyle was reading entire books by himself. Olivia sang songs she learned at school, and Claire was already taking her first wobbly steps, always closely accompanied by Peter, who had become a protective older brother. Lucy had gained weight. Her face was no longer marked by malnutrition, and her hair grew healthy. She wore simple but clean clothes, and carried with her a dignity she had slowly regained. But something still troubled her. Whenever she went to town to shop or take the children to the doctor, she saw women in similar situations to the one she had lived. Single mothers, barefoot children, empty gazes of those who saw no future. One Saturday afternoon, while waiting for Kyle and Olivia to finish their tutoring class at school, she saw a thin, fragile-looking woman begging outside the supermarket with a small child in her lap. Lucy recognized in that gaze the same desperation she had once felt. She approached and offered help. She bought basic food for the woman, talked, listened to her story. It was painfully similar to her own. A husband who abandoned her, a family who rejected her, work that didn't appear. When she returned to the farm that night, Lucy couldn't get the image of the woman out of her head. She talked to Edward during dinner, something they had started doing frequently. He liked to hear her talk about her day, about the children, about the small victories and daily challenges. "Today, I saw a woman in town. She had a small child. She was asking for help." Edward noticed the sadness in her voice. "And you helped?" "I bought her food." "But it's not enough, is it? Tomorrow she'll be there again, hungry again. It's a cycle that doesn't stop." Edward remained silent, thoughtful. Lucy continued, "I keep thinking that if you hadn't stopped the car that day, I'd still be like that. Or worse. And there are so many women like me, like the one I saw today, who won't have the same luck. That makes my heart heavy. What would you like to do?" The question caught Lucy by surprise. She had never thought of herself as someone capable of doing something beyond surviving. But now, with stability, with security, with the examples of Peter and Edward around her, something had changed inside her. "I wish I could help. The way you helped me. Give these women a chance to start over." Edward leaned forward, interested. "How would that be?" Lucy thought for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "The farm is big. There are other empty houses besides the one I live in. If we could bring other families, give them work, housing, education for their children, teach a trade, give them dignity. It wouldn't be charity, it would be opportunity. The way you did with me." Edward was impressed by the clarity of the idea. It wasn't something he had considered, but it made sense. He had resources, he had space, and he had seen firsthand how a well-structured opportunity could transform lives. It's an interesting idea, but it would need structure, organization, perhaps even legal documentation. It would be like a social project. Lucy felt an excitement grow in her chest. "I could help. I know what these women need because I've been through it. I know what it's like to be judged, to be afraid, not to trust anyone. So I could talk to them, help with their adaptation." Edward smiled. That was the Lucy he had seen that first day, beneath all the dirt and despair. A strong, resilient woman with a huge heart and a will to make a difference in the world. "Let's think about this calmly. Make a plan. If we're going to do it, let's do it right." In the following weeks, Edward and Lucy met several times to discuss the project. He brought his administrative experience. She brought her life experience. Together, they drew up a plan. The farm had the capacity to receive up to 5 families in addition to Lucy's. Each family would have a house, specific work on the property, access to education and health, and psychological support. The objective was to give autonomy, not create dependence. Edward sought lawyers to structure everything legally. He created a foundation with his own resources to fund the project. Lucy began attending lectures on social assistance, human rights, and professional training. She discovered that she had a knack for public speaking, for organizing ideas, for inspiring other people. The first family arrived in October. It was Joanna, a 35-year-old woman with 2 children, who had been living in a municipal shelter after escaping a violent relationship. Lucy went to the shelter personally, talked to Joanna, explained the project, and brought her to the farm. The woman cried when she saw the house that would be hers, just as Lucy had cried a year before. The second family arrived in November, then the third, the fourth, each with their story of pain but also of resilience. Lucy became the bridge between these women and the new life they were building. She taught, advised, hugged when necessary, and she saw in them a reflection of what she herself had been. Edward watched everything with pride. The project was succeeding beyond expectations. The women worked with dedication. The children flourished at school, and the farm had transformed into a place of hope. But something else was happening, something he hadn't foreseen. He was falling in love with Lucy. It wasn't pity, nor distant admiration. It was a deep feeling, which grew with each conversation, with each smile from her. With each moment he saw how she transformed lives. But he was afraid of ruining everything, afraid that she would feel pressured, afraid that people would misinterpret, saying that he had used his power to win her over. Lucy also felt something different. She admired Edward, trusted him, and noticed that he looked at her in a special way. But she was also afraid of misinterpreting, afraid of losing everything. If things went wrong, afraid that it was just gratitude mistaken for love. It was Peter who noticed first. One December night, while they were all having dinner together, the boy asked an innocent question that left the 2 adults speechless. Dad, why don't you marry Aunt Lucy? Then we'd be a real family. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucy blushed, not knowing where to look. Edward choked on his water, coughing to hide his embarrassment. Kyle and Olivia laughed, not understanding the weight of the question. Claire clapped in her high chair, oblivious to everything. Peter, these things are complicated. Why? You like Aunt Lucy, she likes you, I see it. I'm not stupid. Edward looked at Lucy, who finally looked up and met his gaze. At that moment, without words, without explanations, the two understood that Peter was right. There was something there, something real, something that had been growing silently for months. But that night, neither of them had the courage to talk about it. They changed the subject, finished dinner, and each went home. But sleep didn't come easy for either of them. Edward stayed awake, replaying every moment of the last few months. Lucy stayed awake, holding Claire, wondering if she would have the courage to risk her heart once more. In the following days, there was a tension in the air. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was a tension full of possibilities. Glances that lasted a second longer, hands that touched by chance and were slow to let go, conversations that flowed naturally but carried an unspoken subtext. It was on a rainy afternoon, when everyone gathered on the main residence's veranda to watch the storm, that Edward finally mustered the courage. The children were playing inside the house, and he and Lucy were alone for a few minutes. Lucy, I need to tell you something. She turned to him, her heart racing. What Peter said the other day about us being a family, he's not entirely wrong, at least not from my side. Lucy felt the air leave her lungs. Edward, I'm not sure I understood correctly. He took a deep breath and finally said the words that had been choked for months. I'm in love with you. Lucy, I don't know when it happened, but it did, and I needed you to know. Lucy felt her eyes fill with tears. They were tears of relief, of happiness, of fear and hope mixed again. Me too. I'm in love with you, but I'm afraid. Afraid of what? That it will ruin everything. That people will talk. That I'll lose everything again. Edward held her hands carefully. I won't let that happen, I promise. We'll go slowly at our own pace, but I don't want to hide what I feel anymore. Lucy nodded, smiling through tears, and there on that veranda, under the heavy rain that fell outside, the two sealed a silent commitment to care for each other, to build something together, to transform that story that began with desperation into something beautiful and lasting. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like it. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The following months were full of discoveries. Edward and Lucy began to build a relationship carefully, respecting each other's fears, celebrating small victories. They dined together every night with the children, strolled around the farm on Sundays, talked for hours about dreams and plans. The social project grew, and the fifth family was welcomed in March, completing the initial capacity they had planned. But not everything was perfect. In April, Edward received an unexpected call. It was Renee, his sister, who had distanced herself since he brought Lucy to the farm. Her voice was different, less harsh, almost regretful. Edward, I need to apologize. For everything I said, for all the judgment. I was wrong. The confession caught Edward by surprise. Renee had never been one to apologize. What made you change your mind? I've been thinking a lot, and I've followed from afar what you've been doing with the foundation. I saw reports, read interviews. The project is reaching people, truly changing lives, and I realized you were right from the start. Lucy isn't an opportunist. She's an extraordinary woman. Edward felt an enormous relief, not because he needed Renee's approval, but because he knew it meant a lot to Lucy. Thank you for telling me that. It means a lot. I'd like to visit the farm, get to know the project properly, and apologize to Lucy in person. The visit happened a week later. Renee arrived bringing gifts for the children and a sincere apology for Lucy. The two talked at length, and Lucy realized that Renee was just a woman protecting her brother, trying to prevent him from being hurt again. The pain of losing her sister-in-law was still present, and the fear that Edward would get involved with someone out of pity or obligation was real. But when Renee saw Edward and Lucy together, saw how they looked at each other, how they cared for each other, how the children flourished in that environment, she understood that it was true love. It wasn't pity, it wasn't gratitude. It was a genuine feeling that had been born of companionship, mutual respect and deep admiration. In May, something unexpected happened. A London television station learned of the farm project and wanted to do a report. Lucy was terrified of the idea of appearing on television, of exposing her story, of publicly reliving everything she had been through. But Edward encouraged her. Your story can inspire others. It can show that it's possible to start over, that there's no shame in needing help, that dignity is never lost, it just remains hidden, waiting for an opportunity to shine again. Lucy accepted. The report aired on a Sunday night and had a huge repercussion. Hundreds of people called the station wanting to know how they could help the project, how they could replicate the initiative in other regions, how they could donate resources. Edward's foundation received so many contacts that it needed to hire a team to meet the demand. But along with the support, criticism also came. People who said that Edward was doing it just to clean his image, that he wanted tax exemption, that he was using Lucy to promote the company. There were even accusations that the relationship between them was a hoax created to generate media. Lucy was shaken. She read the comments on social media and felt a growing anguish. Would people never be able to see beyond prejudices? Would there always be judgment, regardless of the good they were doing? It was Peter, with his child's wisdom, who brought clarity once more. Aunt Lucy, my teacher, said that people who criticize others are usually unhappy people. They can't see the good because they are full of sadness inside. It's not about you. It's about them. Lucy hugged the boy and realized that he was right. She couldn't control what people said or thought. She could only control her own actions and intentions. And her intentions were pure. She wanted to help. She wanted to give back. She wanted to build a world where fewer women needed to rummage through trash to feed their children. In June, the big turning point happened. Lucy reconnected with Marina, her old neighbor from Willow Creek Estates. The woman was working in precarious conditions on another farm in the region, earning a pittance, sleeping in an unventilated small room, being treated with disrespect by her boss. When Marina saw Lucy, she couldn't believe the transformation. Her friend was beautiful, healthy, confident. She seemed like another person. Lucy took Marina to see the project. She showed her the houses, introduced the other women, and explained how everything worked. Marina cried when she saw that it was possible to live with dignity, to have hope again. She asked for help to get out of that situation, and Lucy did not hesitate. She talked to Edward, and together they managed to get Marina out of the abusive job and bring her to the 6th spot they had opened on the farm. It was at that moment that Lucy had a revelation. She herself had been rescued by Edward 1.5 years ago. Now she was rescuing someone else. The cycle was reversing. She was no longer just the woman who had been saved. She was the woman who was saving others. She was living proof that transformation was possible, that people had worth regardless of where they came from, that second chances could generate third, fourth, infinite chances. That night, Lucy had a deep conversation with Edward. They were sitting on the main residence's veranda, watching the stars, listening to the sound of crickets. You know what I realized today? That you didn't save me. You gave me tools so I could save myself. And now I'm doing the same for other women. It's not about charity. It's about empowerment. It's about showing them they are capable. Edward smiled, moved. You transformed something that began as an impulsive gesture into a real movement of social change. That's all you, Lucy, your merit. No, it's ours. You had the courage to stop the car that day. I had the courage to accept help. Peter had the courage to ask why a lady was rummaging in the trash. Each of us had a role, and now we have the responsibility to continue. In July, Edward proposed to Lucy. It wasn't a traditional proposal, with an expensive ring and a fancy restaurant. It happened on an ordinary day, while they were helping to plant a community garden with all the families on the farm. He simply held her hand and asked if she wanted to officially build a life together, as a family, as partners, as companions in all battles. Lucy said yes without hesitation. And at that moment, Kyle, Olivia, Claire, and Peter ran to hug them, forming a circle of joy and love that seemed to summarize everything they had achieved together. The wedding took place in September, in a simple ceremony on the farm itself, with all the project families present. The old staff who had learned to respect Lucy, Renee, who had become a great friend and supporter of the project, and friends that Edward and Lucy had made along this journey. Lucy wore a simple white dress with flowers in her hair. Edward wore a light suit. Peter was the page boy. Kyle and Olivia carried the rings. And Claire, 2 years old now, threw rose petals along the path, although she ate half of them in the process, drawing laughter from everyone. When they exchanged vows, Lucy spoke from an open heart. "Edward, you taught me that kindness is not weakness, that helping is not pity, that love has no conditions. You gave me back my dignity, showed me my worth, gave me the chance to be who I always was inside but couldn't show. I promise to spend the rest of my life returning this love, not just to you, but to the world. I promise that together we will transform pain into hope, misery into opportunity, despair into a new beginning." "Edward," moved, replied, "Lucy, you taught me that privilege is responsibility, that having much means little if not shared, that the strongest people are those who survive the impossible. You transformed my life, Peter's life, and the lives of so many others. I promise to be by your side in every battle, every challenge, every victory. I promise that we will build a legacy that goes beyond us, that will touch generations." When they kissed, sealing their union, everyone applauded. But the most emotional moment came later, when Marina stood up and made an impromptu toast. "I want to thank Lucy for showing me that it's never too late to start over. 6 months ago I had no hope. Today I have a home, dignified work, my children are in school, and I have dreams again. This isn't just a farm, it's a beacon of light for those lost in the dark. And it all started because a man had the courage to stop his car, and a woman had the courage to accept help. May we never forget that." The applause was even louder. Lucy cried with emotion. Edward hugged her tight, and Peter from the back shouted, "Now we're a real family." And they were. A family not of blood but of choice. A family built on respect, love, overcoming adversity, and hope. In the months that followed, the project continued to grow. The foundation opened a second unit on another rural property, this time focused on teenage mothers. Lucy became a speaker, sharing her story in schools, companies, and social events. She inspired people to look beyond their own walls, to see humanity where before they only saw statistics. Kyle became an excellent student, dreaming of being a teacher. Olivia discovered a talent for painting and was already talking about going to art college. Claire grew up surrounded by love, never knowing the hunger that her siblings knew. Peter became a conscious young man, engaged in social causes, determined to continue the legacy that his father had begun. And Lucy, the woman who one day rummaged through trash with her 7-month belly under the scorching Manchester sun, now walked with her head held high, knowing that her story didn't end with her. It continued in every woman who received a chance, in every child who smiled for the first time, in every family that rebuilt lost dignity. The cycle had been broken, and a new one had begun. A cycle of hope, transformation, and love that multiplied every day, proving that no story is written in stone, that there is always a possibility of a new beginning, and that a simple act of kindness can change the world in ways we would never imagine. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Lucy, Edward, and this entire family built with love and courage has touched your hearts deeply. Stories like this remind us that we should never give up, that there is always hope even in the darkest moments, and that a single act of kindness can transform entire lives. If this narrative brought you any learning or emotion, help us spread this message of hope. Subscribe to our channel to follow more inspiring stories that celebrate human strength, the ability to start over, and the transformative power of love. Leave a like if Lucy's story moved you, and share in the comments. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Or have you received help that changed your life? We want to read your stories too. And don't miss our special playlist with equally touching narratives that we've carefully prepared for you. Just click here to the side. Every day we bring real stories of overcoming adversity, love, and hope. We'll be back tomorrow with another emotional journey. Until then, remember, it's never too late to start over. It's never impossible to transform, and it's always worth believing in good. A big hug to all, and we'll see you in the next chapters of life.